Did you know that the word to wed originally meant to pawn, to wager, or to mortgage? Or that the bridal veil was originally meant to be a disguise? For answers to this and many other strange and unusual marriage customs throughout history, as well as across the world, stay tuned for this week's episode where I delve into these folders that I found recently in the Strange As It Seems archives on marriage customs. Strange as it seems. Welcome back. This is Jeff Hix, curator of the Strange As It Seems archives and grandnephew of John Hix, who created Strange As It Seems back in the late 1920s. For this week's episode, we're going to open up these folders I found recently in the archives on marriage customs. One was Marriage Customs Europe, Marriage Customs Non-European, and Marriage Customs Miscellaneous. Let's dive in. To begin with, oftentimes these folders had a John Hix scrapbook on the theme where he would compile a few of the comic strips in the genre of the subject, and in this case it was Here Comes the Bride. This was May 28th, 1939, where he pulled a bunch of these together, but apparently angry hornets are used to test prospective brides among the Tarascan Indians of Mexico, and if the girl runs off, the wedding's off. How about in sections of China, couples are engaged when they are babies. They never even see each other until the wedding day. Crazy. A Hopi Indian man takes his wife's name at marriage. Swiss misses, when they marry, customarily give their husbands enough shirts to last their entire lifetime. The beauties of Tunis, by the way, they stuff themselves with seeds of the fenugreek, which apparently is a legume. The reason is to get fat. Hefty brides are much more in demand than slim ones. And this one, which goes way, way back, the women of the Ladakh tribe in the Himalayas. Looks like the first time John Hix featured this was way back in 1930, maybe like the second or third year of Strange As It Seems. But they're lawfully entitled, each Ladakh woman is, to 4 husbands each. Crazy. Polyandry, great word, is the rule there, even though the population is 2/3 women. Strange as it seems. And more on the Hopi women. Apparently that's not just it. There's an article here way back from 1931 that apparently said the Hopi women were the original suffragettes of America. They're all times the boss of the house, apparently. Not only when a Hopi woman marries, the husband takes her name, but the wife owns everything. And should she feel inclined to get rid of her husband, all she does is place his saddle outside the door, and he knows upon his return he's no longer wanted. There isn't any legal or tribal recourse. The wife's word is final, and having made up her mind, it's seldom that the man has persuasive powers sufficient to cause her to change it and take him back into the family fold. The women do all the work, tilling the soil and raising and harvesting the crops, and the chief duty of the warriors is to act as nursemaids to the multitude of children that usually bless each family. Strange as it seems. And here's one they discovered. Apparently, the United Nations, as they called it in World War II, against the Japanese, the United Nations Japanese battles. But they arrived at New Guinea for the conflict and found these young men of New Guinea. And they apparently would wear a special grass love belt while courting. And the more intense their love, the tighter the belt. Here's a photo too, or actually cut out of an article of the young Papuan wearing a grass love belt. I love this one. This proof even came from the Department of Sociology at Harvard University, and I have the letter here from Emerson Hall at Harvard University proving the fact, but crazy. Apparently the average man spends only 8 minutes and 30 seconds a day courting. Crazy. But it was just an article basically for wives. Here's how men spend their time. Not only does he only spend 8 minutes and 30 seconds for wooing his partner, he spends 8 minutes, 18 seconds in religious activities. This is back in 1939. He works an average of 7 hours, 3 minutes, sleeps 8 hours and 24 minutes a day. The woman, however, has 29 minutes more for an extra 40 winks. I guess that's what she called her beauty sleep. These facts were revealed in this compilation of data from Batiram Sorokin, professor of sociology at Harvard University. Amazing. Some interesting facts of how men and women spent their time in the late 1930s. And here's the final ones here from the John Hix era on marriage customs. But apparently if a Brahmin can't find a wife, he marries a tree. Married couples of the Kowodo tribe, this is in northern Nigeria, they never mention each other's personal names. I consider that disrespectful. Crazy. How about in India? The caste system is so closely adhered to that the daughter of a bowl maker cannot marry the son of a plate maker. Although their race, language, and religion may be the same, the caste system keeps them from marrying. According to Hippocrates, a husband of the Scyth race, this is failing to have any children by his wife, he was forced to wear women's clothes and conform to women's habits. That's kind of crazy. And here's one called the Boogie Woogie. But this is a crazy one. The Bugis, I guess, is, I don't know how to pronounce that, but this tribe, the bride's feet must not touch the ground during 3 days of a marriage ceremony. And apparently she's drugged, so she won't look at any other men for the period. She's carried about on the shoulder of the head of her family. Crazy letter here from apparently a friend, Lewis Hill. He said, "The drinks, smokes are surely on, John Hix, or the sun. What do you think? A ration of lion roast ought to be the choice as well." Crazy. He goes, "Are they in the Greater or Lesser Antilles? I don't know. You don't know. Hicks don't know. Apparently I'll quit before I get all mixed too." Crazy friendly letter from a friend of the John and Ernest Hix back in the 1940s. And here's one from 43, kind of toward the end of the John Hix era. A new Moroccan wife must sit for 7 days on exhibition, apparently in her husband's home. Any woman can come in from the street and look at her. And apparently it's so exhausting that she faints oftentimes, and she's revived with a spoonful of black pepper. Ernest Hix featured this again in the 1940s after the John Hix era. And the final one from John Hix here, crazy one. This is also Ernest featured this later, but girls betrothed in the on Solomon Island, they're secluded for several years in a betrothal cage, often so small they must sit in the crouching position. Sounds like torture. Crazy. An engaged girl, as Ernest Hix put it, is also an engaged girl. Not fun. But that kind of wraps it up for the John Hix era, which ended, strange as it seems, on D-Day, June 6, 1944. My great uncle John Hix died. Had nothing to do with the war. He died of myocarditis. And his brother Ernest, my grandfather, took it over in 1944 and ran it for 4 years himself until he died, strange as it seems, in a plane crash. But over the 4 years, he had a massive amount of marriage customs, strange as it seems, so many that we can't even get to all of them. We'll just touch on the surface of some of these, but here's one on the Sakhalin Island. A man will trade his wife for a dog. Apparently, dogs, this is up in primitive race of fishers and hunters up near Alaska, and I guess the northern half of the island belongs to Russia. But a woman's worth no more than a dog or even a boat. But a man will gladly trade his wife for a valuable dog or boat on the Sakhalin Island, crazy, in the North Pacific. And here's a couple, not so nice, but in Russia, apparently, it was formerly the custom for the bride's father to present the groom with a new whip to use on the bride. Not very nice there. And it was also legal at one time, by the way, in ancient Scotland, to beat your wife. Yikes. But only if you used a stick that was no bigger than your little finger, strange as it seems. And apparently this came from the Mentor. This goes all the way back to January of 1912. 1922. This article does. I guess it stayed in the Strange as It Seems archives, or was something that John Hix was keeping for several years. He didn't start the comic strip till 1928, so he held on to this for at least 6 years, and I guess didn't even use it until Ernest Hix but apparently crazy. But this, it was in the Middle Ages when a Scotch law held that a woman who committed trespass without the knowledge of her husband was liable to be chastised like a child under age. There was also a law that no man should beat his wife with a stick thicker than his little finger. Crazy. It's difficult to define exactly the character of the medieval lady, for from the time of Charlemagne until the end of the 16th century, she was the subject of exaggerated devotion and unbridled satire. Crazy. Roswitha, a gifted nun of the 10th century who wrote plays, and Christine de Pizan, a poet of the 15th century, and give pictures that show she had but two choices in life: matrimony or the cloister. Not a great time to be a woman back in the Middle Ages, huh? And here in Karelia, the bride's mother apparently stays weeping in the church after the wedding and refuses to budge until she's bribed by the groom's family. Crazy. How about in old Belgium? A bride was supposed to kiss everyone she met on the street after the wedding, but in Italy, apparently Italian girls had to go to church escorted by armed guards because any man who stole a kiss could marry them. Amazing. Persian men were taught, this is a great illustration, Persian men were taught that women knew nothing at all and always had to do the exact opposite of what their wives suggested. It's a great comic there. And Japanese brides, apparently pre-war, wore white as mourning because to their families they were dead, never to leave their husband's home save as corpses. It's kind of morbid. Here's a few from the Hindu society. A high caste Hindu with a daughter, still unmarried at the age of 12, apparently became a social outcast. It's a sin for a Hindu woman to utter or even dream her husband's name. And according to an old Hindu belief, a man could marry a nymph by repeating her name in a cemetery at night. Crazy. Here's one from the American Indians. Apparently, the bride among some of the American tribes, bride never left her parents. Not a lot of fun for the groom there, huh? How about a Tuareg man? He courts a girl for 10 years before marriage, and he's the one that wears the veil at night and day as well. The women never wear them, but the men do. Crazy. How about this one in Puritan New England? By law, engaged couples had to speak to each other only through a 6-foot speaking tube. Here's looks like a early drawing before the comic strip of that strange custom. And in Spanish California, the bridegroom had to give his bride 6 of everything for her trousseau. 6 of everything. Crazy. And here's one. In fact, I think this comes back. The Batak civilization, Elsie Hix, my grandmother, featured them again. There's quite a few articles in here on this really interesting tribe, but this was a crazy custom. Check this out. Although civilized in most respects, a Batak groom must kidnap his bride, and if her parents catch him, they torture him to death. But if he gets her home, he wires them an invitation to the wedding. This is crazy. I guess this even went on after cars and telegraph and all of that. There's some amazing magic ceremonies of the Bataks as well. Crazy, crazy. But that wraps it up for the Ernest Hix era. He passed away, as I mentioned, in a plane crash in 1948. And then my grandma Elsie took over the comic strip and ran it really through the 1950s and into the late 1960s, when my parents took it over for a few years before it finally closed down and there were no longer any papers carrying the comic strip. But here's a few from my grandma's era. The bridal veil, I mentioned this at the top of the hour, apparently originated as a disguise. It played a part in the marriage ceremonies of nearly every people on earth. Once it completely hid the bride's face, and it was to conceal her from the covetous glances of evil spirits. Crazy. I've mentioned this before already, but to wed also meant to wager, mortgage, or pawn, or to pay money, horses or cattle, with which the bride was bought from her father, when, of course, women were property and not human beings in their own right. How about the single women of the Tarahumara tribe? And this is in Mexico. They wear one skirt, and an additional skirt every year after that in marriage, right, is added. Crazy custom there. How about when the Guahara belle of that tribe, if she's married, her father smashes an earthen pot on the ground. Her years of marriage are determined by the number of broken pieces of pottery on the ground. Crazy. How about among some Guatemalan Indians, a suitor works for his future father-in-law. If the engagement is broken by the girl's parents, her father repays by working for the suitor. Crazy. How about the marriage of girls in some of the Algerian tribes? Depends on her dowry, but which is made up of gold pieces, jewelry, in which she has earned as an entertainer. That which she's earned as an entertainer, she gets to keep on her person. Crazy. The Kyrgyz of Central Asia, they allow everyone in the entire community to attend the wedding ceremony except for the bride and groom. Everybody else gets to go. Crazy. How about the Tatars? They contracted marriages between their deceased children, even staged complete ceremonies, and the fathers and mothers considered themselves mutually related. Crazy, keeping their deceased children's name alive. How about a Korean bridegroom here wears a hat woven from the hair of paternal ancestors. Amazing. And more than one half of the female population of British India marry before reaching the age of 15. Back to the Tarahumara Indian tribe of Mexico again. This is a strange custom, but apparently they court by throwing stones at their men of choice, and if the man throws the stones back at them, they're engaged. Crazy. And here's the final one from the Elsie Hix era and from the Strange as It Seems archives. I saw a lot of these in the archives. The Chicago Natural History Museum Bulletin. Apparently we loved getting facts, all kinds of facts, strange and unusual things that appeared in this bulletin. But this was the final one I found, which was the same tribe where you had to kidnap your bride and get away with it, or you were tortured and killed. Crazy. But apparently among the Batak tribe, the marriage ceremony was a pretty simple one. The groom presents a small gift to the intended bride's parents. The betrothed sit down with the married couple. They eat from the same dish, smoke the same cigar, and that ends the ceremony. Man, that 3 times I was married, that would have saved me a lot of money. Well, that wraps it up for this week's episode. Mine from the Strange as It Seems archives, all the folders on strange marriage customs throughout history and across the world. If you like content like this, strange and unusual facts about science, nature, and humanity in general, hit the bell to subscribe, like, follow, leave me a comment, and I'll leave you today with a quote by Socrates about marriage. I love this one. He said, "By all means, marry. If you get a good wife or husband, you'll be happy. If you get a bad one, you'll become a philosopher." See you next week for more content here at Strange as It Seems.